Hello, you're back with Dave and Tim with the Single Malt Review, continuing our look at Johnnie Walker Black Label, circa 1960s. And also, if I can just grab this out here, present day Johnnie Walker Black Label. Going to do a bit of a side-by-side.
It's going to be tasting comparison, and one hell of a tasting comparison. This is a bit of a whiskey time machine here.
Yeah.
It's going to be, what is that, just about 60-odd years from then to now. Same whiskey, well, slightly different whiskey. As discussed, this one is missing one rather crucial feature to the 12, and that it's outside of having an age statement. Lost it for a few years there in the intervening decades, but it's long back on this one, so will we see any changes? I think we almost have to. Just think of this distilling environment and how it's changed in those 60 years since those bottles were, well, bottled. Think of the distilleries that have closed, that have changed ownership. The amount of movement on the board has just been astonishing. So this will be both a test of, I suppose, how the quality has maintained and how Johnnie Walker's ability to maintain blending consistency. Because really the closer it is, the better it is in terms of how they've been able to keep their blend stable over all this time, but we shall see. And the burning question, which is better?
Please do check out our previous episode if you'd like to see more on this wonderful antique bottle of Johnnie Walker.
Well, straight off the bat, this one looks a lot lighter, but then again, it's a much smaller bottle. So we'll have to do a proper one in the glass there. But I think
but the modern one is still a bit paler.
I think they've throttled back the old colouring there, and probably gone on for that.
Possibly even a lower strength nowadays too.
I think it's always been historically 40%, but of course this one in its general paucity of information doesn't tell you, but I think the general understanding is that yes, has always been 40%, although it may have been a more of a rounded figure on this older one. It may not have been sort of as expertly determined as it is today. So let me just familiarise myself on the nose of the first one. That's the one. It's rich. I think it's going to be the richness that does it. It's coaly, it's mineral, it's rich, and it's a little bit prickly.
I get a bit of coal and salt and some wonderful desserts.
And then the modern example, which I agree that is just a little bit lighter in terms of colour. Oh, it's so different. It's completely different.
Yeah, it's a much more maritime, more chlorine tinged.
It's much less coaly and much more peaty. They're both very peaty in terms of their smoke presence in the blend, but the peat manifests very, very differently. This one's drier as well, so much drier from the off.
There's much less of that chocolate and cake that I was getting before.
Yeah, and there's a pretty easy explanation for why that's the case. Way back in time in the 60s here, sherry casks, still the dominant cask. The great bourbonisation of everything had not quite slipped over. You could still, as far as I'm aware, I'd have to double check this, but I'm fairly confident, fairly sure you could still bottle sherry in the UK. So it still just got barged over, decasked over there, and then you had this big old infinite cheap supply of your traditional sherry oak, which is now, the rare as hen's teeth, the good stuff. Because no one drinks sherry anymore. But back in the days of the 60s, Bristol Cream, everyone, there was a bottle of sherry under the sink of every kitchen in Britain. So, very different playing field. And whereas this, long into the
way more bourbon.
The bourbon lands. So, on the tongue.
Oh, yep, that's lighter, it's much more zesty. I think way more... I'm not going to say there's more grain spirit in there, but there's much more of what I think of as grain spirit flavours. There's a lot more grain whiskey.
There's less depth. There's sure as hell less depth. For a whiskey that is on paper older, without that prickle, this one is maybe a little smoother. That otherwise tastes a little bit more... Bland is not the right word, but a little more... There's a cleanliness.
It is a narrower spectrum of flavours, like for fewer extremes. There's just that gentle, lemony bourbon cask sweetness.
Lemony is a good one too. There's a heap of citrus in here. And I think I know what the big difference here might be in terms of the peat. I think there is more Colilo going on in here than whatever they have used in this original one. And this is based on tasting alone, but Colilo, like really no other distillery, especially no other island peating distillery, brings that lemon citrus in such a real capacity that to pick it up this distinctly, I think a lot of this peat is coming from Colilo, and they that's one of the Walker distilleries, and they use it in no small degree in their Johnnie Walker Green.
Is melding well with the bourbon cask maturation though. Like I got strong pecan pie notes of the 1960s version. Now I'm getting key lime, so we're still in pie territory. Sort of shifted to a slightly different classic American dessert.
Let me go back very briefly. It's the night and day. Sherry influence on this one. I think that's the key thing is that sherry maturation. That is really quite weird.
So I would, if someone just told me in service to me sight unseen, I would take at face value this was a single malt whiskey if someone had said so. Not so much for the contemporary black label.
Apropos of nothing, no expertise whatsoever, I would say that there is very likely more single malt in the old version because single malt itself was just less of a commodity. It was less expensive. There was less reason to sort of to be mean with it because it wasn't, or at least depending on the distillery, it hadn't achieved this astronomical rarity
the same degree of prestige or
yeah.
fetishization even.
So it would have been a case of, well, we've got it, we should use it, kind of a thing. Whereas now, you know, Collida's worth Collida, everything that went into these is now at such a premium that you want to be as careful with it as you can. And just the general practices of producing grain whiskey and maturing everything across the board is so much more careful, so much more consistent now that you can probably get away with using less and less of your single malt. So it makes perfect sense in terms of marketing logistics, but you can really tell the difference in the whiskey. I was sure they were going to be different. This is different on a scale that I'm not sure I was quite ready for.
Adding that water has really brought out some of the dessert or confectionery notes I picked up before. I'm getting waves of milk chocolate peanuts now.
It has sweetened up the modern one as well, but holy moly. Yeah, that chocolate is become extremely real.
Whereas it is almost entirely gone from the modern expression, which is replaced with more of the citrus and lemon drops and lemon pie.
When you said this could be mistaken for single malt, this is, even with water now, 100% agree. That's just the depth of flavour and the richness is quite incredible.
Yeah.
I think were we to... Actually, no, let's score these guys, because that's the final, doing the final justice here. First, which one do you prefer? I prefer the old one.
I prefer the old as well.
Yeah. Which is troubling because that's intrinsically limited supply of things from the 1960s.
Yeah.
They are not making any more of the 1960s outside of television. So a difficult thing to have a favourite of there. But I think it's really the only sane whiskey drinker's way to go. There's simply more whiskey in here. There's more of an interesting drop. So and scores for this. The Glen scores both ways, but I would score the old one. Heck, I'd score the old one in 87, and the new one in 82.
Yeah,
that would be my Venn between these two guys.
Now I have this oddest recollection. We have tried a modern Johnnie Walker Black in isolation.
We sure have.
A few years ago. I forget what we scored, but it did fare quite well. But the older expression is, I think, leaps and bounds ahead of it. And I would award this a comfortable 89. It is a superior blended whiskey.
Yeah. No, that's. I was expecting something. This is a big deal. This is big something.
Yeah.
I'd say anyone that has access to this, enjoy it for sure. This is
definitely one to look out for on the auction markets. Was it hugely pricey?
I mean, more than typical black label, but for one in sub mint condition. In terms of the packaging, the whiskey's perfectly fine. Not even twice the price of regular black label. notes.
So in recent months we've tried a Guinness from the 1950s, now a Johnnie Walker from the 1960s, and both of them have stood the test of time and remained.
We're just living in the past over here at the Single Malt Review. It's tremendous. They say whiskey is liquid history, but we're really proving that point. It's like the Doctor Who up in here, only with drinking. Much more entertaining show. Anyway, I hope that was of some. I hope that was enlightening to you guys out there, because it was sure as hell enlightening to us, way more than I thought it was going to be. I was talking about maintaining consistency in blending. Somewhere along the line, somewhere over 60 years, so it's entirely forgivable, the blenders over at Johnnie Walker have gone, there's been a big collective shrug and gone, and things have changed pretty manifestly into this.
I'm going to guess it would be like a game of telephone. If you tried each year's black label one after the other, the change would be barely perceptible. But going straight from one end of the timeline to the other lets us just taste the extremes, see how much it's sort of drifted over time, where a little bit of influence has changed, someone's perspective comes in, they reformulate things a little, switch out some cast types, and incremental changes, but it leads to an actual evolution.
Yeah, no, that's I think very, 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 very true. But to taste either end of the spectrum in isolation, remarkable stuff.
Yes,
but just as a snapshot of Scotch whisky way back then, when so much was different, when sherry casks were the norm, when single malt whisky was not a coveted substance like it is now, it really is. It is liquid fascination. So anyway, gone along in that one, but never mind. If you're still with us, then thank you. Solange, I'm going to do it. Here it comes. Oh, the sacrilege has happened. It's the meeting of two timelines. If there was a third Picard, we'd have a final episode on our hands, but I'll just have to be. Hey, not bad. Not bad. I'm not going to say I like that one best of all, but it's pretty cracking stuff. Alright, enough of this nonsense. Slanjo, we'll catch you next time on the Single Malt Review.